Meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals to order. We have the first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from last meeting. Did everybody get them and have a chance to read them?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so does anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve?
Yes.
To approve, yep. Yes, I make a motion to approve.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. All right, do we have to wait 5 minutes before we open the?
Yeah, we do. But I think, is 286 Humphrey advertised for 7 o'clock?
I don't have the agenda in front
I
of me.
don't have the agenda.
Did not print that out last night.
It's 7:10.
Yeah, you're 7:10, so.
Because I think, well, if you want to continue 22, 25, and that's 53 Pearson Road, and 29 Essex Street, 2306. Let me just pull up the agenda. Hang on. Can you guys see it on the screen yet in front of you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so here's the agenda.
Okay, great. So, we will continue both of those? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, so petition number two, item number 2, petition 2303, that was heard back in April. I reached out to the petitioner to see if he would be interested in seeking a withdrawal because he was petitioning them for an accessory apartment, but now per town, the vote made at town meeting, accessory dwelling units, as they're now called, are
As of
allowed by
right.
right, so it's no longer under the jurisdiction of the ZBA, or the use is no longer under the jurisdiction of the ZBA, so I guess until he would, signs the withdrawal form,
We continue it?
yeah.
Okay. So do I just make a motion to continue petition 2303?
Yeah.
So moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then we'll also continue petition 2306
and 2225. I have 2 signed continuances on record from Attorney DRUCAS and Attorney Cipolletta.
Okay, all right,
So
so,
those will be continued to July
so move
18th.
to continue petition 2306.
Second.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And 2225.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, excellent.
And
And-
then I think we can call 2304, and Mr. Schuster, I think, will be able to speak to that one as well.
Okay.
Yes, so we can call 2304, which is the Humphrey Street to special permit to install an outdoor cooler unit at 286 Humphrey Street. And Mr. Schutzer, would you like to
Yes, I
draw?
would. Mr. INGEMI is going to withdraw the petition, or would request to be permitted to withdraw it without prejudice due to the time constraints in wanting to get the restaurant open. All of the refrigeration units that we had addressed to be outside will be put in the basement. They were before the planning board yesterday with regard to the area that would have been utilized for that, for the tables and the lights and whatnot. So at this juncture, we'll be asking leave to withdraw without prejudice.
Okay. So move to withdraw petition, what number was that one?
That was 2304.
2304.
I'll second that.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, still got 3 minutes.
Yeah, so, quick little beginning of the meeting recess for 3 minutes.
For 3
before
minutes.
we call 2305.
You can go watch a short film if you'd like.
Just check your phone.
Petition 2305, which is to build a home at 0 Lodge Road.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Attorney Kenneth SHUTZER with offices at 152 Lynn Way in Lynn, Mass. I'm here this evening with my clients Ilya and Jean. Ilya and Jean both live in Swampscott. Ilya is an MIT graduate. He graduated from their business school. Jean is his brother-in-law, and they work together, and they've worked together for 8 years. You may know them because they were before your board on the Blaney Street project when they were converting, was it the rectory building? Convent. And that's going on as we speak now. They've been in the renovation and the residential home building business now for how many years?
It's 9.
9 years. I was not their attorney last time they appeared before the board. It was Attorney Paul Lynch. I am here because of an issue that arose, which made it virtually impossible for Mr. Lynch to continue representing them. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, if you'll indulge me. Back in, I think it was November of 2022, a petition was put in. It's not the petition you're looking at now, to put a two-family on that lot. Prior to doing that, though, their counsel, when they purchased the property for a little over $250,000, engaged the services of Attorney Lynch to do a title opinion on the property in order for them to procure the necessary title insurance to purchase it, which was done. And in the process of doing so, Mr. Lynch provided the then building inspector, Richard Baldacci, with documents that were requested. And I think as a result of that, and I'm going to be providing you with some information, Richard Baldacci then sent a letter back to Mr. Lynch and then to the council that the lot, in fact, was a buildable lot, and then they went and they purchased it. One of the issues that is...
Oh, the people are having trouble hearing. Can you hold your microphone closer?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Would you like me to repeat any of what was said, or?
No, it's
No, I think you're fine.
All right, thank you. You know, one of the issues that came up on that opinion, that title opinion, was the issue of the zoning map that was in effect at the time. Sort of now dialing back just a little bit, this lot was subdivided. And as a matter of fact, I think the Grassos at 8 Lodge are living in, it's Lot A. The lot in question is Lot B. And it was a much larger lot, and it was subdivided in 1949. Now, it was subdivided prior to the institution of the subdivision control order, which came into effect in 1952. So, in theory, this subdivision would have been an approved subdivision, which would have then allowed the existing lot, which had the house on it, to be continue to have its existence as a buildable lot. Unfortunately, if we look at it from a distance now, we realize that what was created theoretically would have been 2 non-conforming lots, and it wouldn't have been a pre-existing non-conforming lot because, in theory, the bylaw, which was in existence in 1948, said the following. It said that and there was a warrant article, and I'll be providing that as well. The warrant article in 1948 said the following. It said if the lots are either by plan and of record or by deed by record or separately assessed, then there would be no merger. And that was the nature of that warrant article that was adopted in September of 1948. The subdivision wasn't until 1949, and part of the problem that existed, and I think it may have been some of the conflict that may have occurred when Attorney Lynch was trying to provide that title opinion, was that he was relying on a zoning map that he obtained, which was dated March the 1st, 1948, which, from the plan that he submitted, which was part of the original package, showed that that lot had been subdivided. And in theory, it had been subdivided prior to the 1948 warrant article, which it would have been separately assessed and we wouldn't be here. It was brought to our attention, and it was brought to the attention of this board through the assistance, I believe, of Attorney Demento, who was assisting Mr. Longfellow, who had written a request that the board not take favorable action, which I believe was included in the prior package. I have it. I'm sure his feelings may or may not have changed, but at the time, with the two-family that was being suggested, he was in opposition. I have his letter, and I'll read the portions of the letter that I think are germane, and obviously he can respond to it as well. Now, we find ourselves in a situation where what would have been the criteria that one would have looked at when one was writing this title opinion. The first was the map that I referred to. I believe that the part of the problem was that it was dated March the 1st, but it had been revised multiple times, and what was submitted and the revisions that were submitted on that plan that was revised, at least in the copy that I had, was so small I didn't notice it until it was brought to my attention. And potentially, and I can't speak for Mr. Lynch, he most likely didn't see it when he submitted the application and submitted the memorandum, which indicated that in fact the lot had been subdivided earlier and therefore comported with and therefore was controlled by the 1948 zoning article that was in effect and made that other lot, Lot B, the one that is 0 Lodge Road, a buildable lot. I don't think that's true. I think that there was an error. I would concur with the opinion of Attorney Demento and the opinion of the abutter, Mr. Longfellow, who was the one who brought that to the board's attention back in November of 2022. But part of the problem was, and these are some of the unknowns, is that when you then went to the assessor's office to try to confirm or dispel these issues, those records don't exist in a form that I'm advised that is the basis of drawing a correct inference, whether correct or not, because those records are not accurate. And that's what's I've been advised. I don't know. But in this package, you will see that goes back to 1910, and I can't confirm or deny that it's valuable. But in 1910, it reflects a lot of 0.15 acres, which is exactly the size. If you convert that into feet, it's exactly the square footage of the lot B in question. So you could look at that and draw that conclusion. But I'm advised that you can't even rely on that. So what else can you rely on? Well, then you go back to the 1949 decision of the planning board when they permitted the subdivision of this lot into Lot A and Lot B. The easiest thing to do would be to look at their minutes to determine what their thinking was, because that's the one unknown for which it's virtually impossible to make any kind of conclusion that makes sense. Because clearly one would not take a buildable lot and create two non-buildable lots, have it approved, this is before the subdivision control law, so therefore the planning board had that authority, and create two non-conforming lots. And they signed off on it. Now, one would have been able to have read their minutes to determine the legitimacy or the efficacy or their thinking process when they did this. But if you think about it logically, what may have occurred as a result of that, because Lot A, that's the Grasso lot, has been sold multiple times. There have been multiple mortgages on that lot. And obviously those title examiners and those title insurance companies and those lenders should have seen the same information that we have, but they couldn't have and interpreted it that way, because had they would have determined that they were insuring and they were giving a loan and collateralizing a non-buildable lot, because at the time it was created by that subdivision, it made it non-buildable. You couldn't tear it down today because it's been in existence and the building permits are there, but it's no longer a buildable lot. So how could we have done this? What would have happened in 1949 that would have explained it? I don't have an answer for you. And the best we could do is we had a records request that was made, and this was done by Mr. Lynch, of the town clerk, and the town clerk reported back that all of those records have been destroyed. We have no records. We have no old assessors records. We have no old planning board records. We can't give you an answer, and therefore it's left to your imagination. That's the problem. Now, as a result of where we are now, I would unfortunately agree that we have a difficult hurdle, because we have a large lot, and by that large I mean in terms of looking at the lots on Muriel, or the lots on Lodge, or the lots that surround it. It's one of the larger lots. We also heard from, and I reviewed some of the information that occurred in November. We heard that the projection of what was anticipated to be built as a two-family was problematic. There are two families there in that neighborhood, but the overriding concern was that the house was too big and we wanted something smaller. So what we did, or what was done before I became involved, is we looked at the letter. It was called Opposition to Petition for Variance, which was penned by Mr. Longfellow, and then signed off by Mr. and Mrs. Grasso of 8 Lodge, which is the other lot, Mr. Savino, Erica and Monica Lindquist, Longfellow, and Michael Walsh. I don't know who else might be here this evening. But the upshot of that letter, and I'm picking out the sections that I think are relevant, at least to our hearing, and it says, to be clear, we are not opposed to a reasonable structure on this presently unbuildable piece of land. Well, the two parts of that need to be addressed is the fact that they suggest that they're not opposed to a reasonable structure. I assume by reasonable they're referring to a single family, and one that is more likely to be commensurate in size with the other homes. But the other part of it is that it's on an unbuildable piece of land, and that I would indicate is uncontroverted. There is this problem. Now, what can be done? Well, there clearly is a mechanism to address this, and in there lies the chore that I'm asking this board to work with me, work with Ilya and Jean to try to resolve, because otherwise what we have is a 6,543, whatever it is, square feet parcel of land, which has been vacant now for 75 years since it was subdivided in 1949, approximately 75 years. When housing is in demand, when property is at a premium, and there aren't any other these orphan lots that are floating around. And the reason I bring that to your attention is because I'll be seeking and asking this board, as the application so suggests, a variance. Now, a variance is something that the board not necessarily is loath to grant, but there are criteria that make it more difficult in order to provide the necessary indicia for the board to act favorably. And to that end, one of the issues that are raised by way of the variance are really broken into a number of categories, and I'm going to go through them with you. The first is one that we're all familiar with, that it has to be owing to certain circumstances, either with the shape, the topography, or the soil conditions. For whatever reason, those are the magic words. So I'm going to address that in just a moment, but the other ones are a little easier to address. It says, but not affecting generally the zoning district in which it is located. We're talking about one parcel and not the zoning district in which it's located, because it's not going to have any impact whatsoever on the zoning district. The zoning district doesn't have other unbuildable lots like this. The zoning district isn't going to be affected by this board if the board were predisposed to grant that variance. The second part of that is a literal enforcement of the provisions of this bylaw would involve substantial hardship. And that I'm going to speak to as well. And I may have spoken to it already. And then the last part is, and that desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public. Substantial detriment to the public good. So I don't believe there's any detriment to the public good. And substantial, I would suggest, is a criteria which has not been met. And then it goes on to further add, and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of such bylaw. Okay. Now I have to get back to the question of the day. What are the factors that make this lot fall within that criteria of shape, topography, or soil conditions? I would suggest to you that this lot is, nothing about it is different in its shape. The topography is relatively flat. So that leaves me with the soil. And in that, interestingly enough, by reviewing the statements attributed to those that were present, either by Zoom or in person, was that the soil conditions in this area are problematic because of flooding conditions, which make this a low-level area where water is, and that was one of the primary concerns, the flooding, as I recall from what I heard, which precipitated a lot of the discussion. So is there something unique about the soil? The answer is absolutely yes. This is an area that hasn't been built on because these soil conditions have been problematic. But there are ways that one can build homes in areas such as this. And the way they do it, and the way they do it without affecting their neighbors, is they build them on stilts or on pillars. They have breakaway underneath. We've done this on multiple times. I've been involved in discussions with property that have been by the beach. And you can do it that way. The reason you want to do it that way is you don't want to displace additional water. You want to be concerned about whatever water flowage is created is not going to flow onto neighbor's property, and you don't want to exacerbate a situation that is already, at least as far as they're concerned, problematic. So the conditions.
I'm sorry, we need to keep the door open.
Yes.
It has to be an open meeting. I'm so sorry. I know it's really hard because nobody.
Move
it's hard to
closer,
hear.
please move closer too.
Sorry.
So insofar as the conditions of the soil were concerning to the neighbors, they also give us the opportunity to distinguish this lot for purposes of the required variance. I can say, at least somewhat with a straight face, and I think it's terribly important that I do this, is that this board, if it were to grant the relief that's requested, is not going to change or derogate from or cause any substantial hardship under the variance criteria. And there are times, and clearly there would not be this relief that's available in the bylaw if the relief was never to be granted. But there are those unique circumstances. You couple that with the tortured history of what these gentlemen have gone through. You know, what they did, what they tried to do, was the due diligence that anybody who is familiar with real estate would do. They hired a professional. The professional provided an opinion. The professional reached out to the then building inspector, Richard Baldacci. The building inspector said he wanted some additional material. The additional materials were provided by Mr. Lynch to Mr. Baldacci, and Mr. Baldacci then wrote a letter. I have tons of copies of all of this. Would you like me to pass that out now, or do you?
I mean,
I have it all. To
I think
give
it's
out
all
to.
available. We've all looked at everything. That's
Oh, you have, because I just made hundreds of copies of all this, so you'd have it if you don't. But he then wrote this decision, and then after that decision was written and conveyed to their conveyancing attorney, they purchased the property. So they did what they thought was the only, well, was not only the only, but the legitimate way of validating their investment and having their lender and their title counsel affirm that what they were doing was not going to subject them to where they are right now. So sometimes what we find ourselves doing is jumping into things. That was never the case here. They went through this as systematically as they could, but some of the information was either unobtainable, some of the information was incorrect, and some of the...
Quick question, do you have the decision from 1949? Was that submitted?
That's what I don't have. That's the planning board. I have a copy of that plan, which is the plan that shows the existing house on Lot A, which is the grass house, and it also shows Lot B, and it shows that it was signed by the planning board in 1949. There would have been minutes that would have accompanied that decision, which would have explained to us.
But we don't even have the written decision. All that you have is the map.
Yeah. And we put out a records request to the town, and let me just, I must give you all this stuff since I spent all the time photocopying it. Can I approach?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm trying to think of what. November. Did we have something in November?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I also have, excuse me, the earlier one that was done, excuse me, prior to their purchasing it. So I'll send that out too.
Did you get this today, or did you have it from last time? I had it. It was from last time. I feel like I should have it from last time, but of course I can't. There's so many continued things.
I can't remember if this was part of the original packet or if somebody just, maybe Walden changed it up to us at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's the only color copy.
What's that?
Thank you.
A little of what they did in order to try to The only other thing I do have, which I'll pass out, is the work that was done by Woods Hole Group. They're dealing with the sea level rise and the storm surge protection and things such as that, because that was obviously came up at the November hearing about the concern, and then there was this report that was done. I suspect that the statements of the abutters about the issues with the water are probably more to the point in this letter, but
Thank you.
okay. So that's where we are. We have a situation where efforts were made in order to determine whether the lot was buildable. Those efforts were somewhat plagued by the lack of information and somewhat plagued by the fact that the town of Swampscott didn't even have within its possession a 1948 zoning map, that the zoning map that we then discovered was provided by Mr. Demento, who happened to have a copy somehow of a 1948 map, which reflected differently from the map that was provided, which Mr. Lynch got from Town Hall, which showed that there was a division of those two lots. I think what we've now learned is that there were revisions that were made to the 1948 map, but the map still was titled March the 1st, 1948. So if one were to have looked at it and they saw the subdivision between those two lots, they would not have been able to have determined when that occurred without more information. That's where we are today. So we find ourselves in the unenviable position of owning this lot, a lot that could provide housing, which is not the criteria, mind you, for your granting the relief that we're seeking. But I do think that if you wish, there is a vehicle, there is a mechanism for you to obtain, or for them to obtain with your authorization, the necessary relief, which would be to determine that this was a buildable lot. The second part of this would be, if the board were to grant the variance, is that it would, in whatever conditions, which is another part of this, whatever conditions the board wanted to set, because whatever relief that you would grant, you can grant them with whatever conditions you want. It could be, because it is zoned in an A4, so it could theoretically be a two-family, but they're not looking for a two-family now. They wanted to run into as few obstructions with the neighbors as possible. They wanted to be the good neighbors. They wanted to be able to address the concerns that were raised in this letter of opposition. And by doing that, the house is half the size it was. It's now a one-family. It is dimensionally within, there's no dimensional requirements that are being made. There would be no further relief that would be required. The house would be completely comporting with all the dimensional aspects. That would be lot coverage, that would be gross square footage, that would be all of the factors that this board normally has to tackle when people are asking for that relief. We just need to determine what in 1949 they must have thought they had already done, But in today's way of looking at things, I think there either was something that was done to legitimize it that we don't have, and so 75 years after that date, without that information, we're asking you, this board, to do just that. And within your authority, you can grant the variance which would accomplish the relief that we're seeking. I'm here to answer any questions as best I can. You know, obviously, you know, nobody is throwing anyone under the bus, but there's been a tortured history of what's occurred, and we're looking for resolution, and we're hoping this board can afford us.
I'm going to ask you a question that I asked you right before and you answered, but just so you can answer for everybody, was that had you been to planning for a site plan review, since this is for a house over 3,000 square feet?
The house that's going to be built, and obviously, the next step, if this board were to grant the relief, as I said, they could do it with conditions, and if whatever conditions they wanted. But clearly, if it required, and at this point I am advised that the house and the plans that ultimately will be submitted have been pared down from this earlier iteration, which was done by Mr. Lynch, in order to have as few additional public dialogues, and by making it under 3,000 square feet, it would require no additional relief from the planning board. So the ultimate plans, because these are the plans that you have are right now not necessarily the final plans.
Just hold for 1 second, because
Oh.
can someone
Close
close that now?
door, now
Yeah,
we've
now we
opened
can
that
close
door.
I just think everyone's looking at me like they can't quite hear you.
Oh. Should I
So
hold
what
this
he's
up?
saying?
No, we're just gonna
No, I'm
open
just gonna recap real quickly. So what he's saying is that if the house is over 3,000 square feet, they are required to get a site plan review from the planning board, which they have not done. That would be a requirement before any special permit could be granted from this board. But since they haven't done that, and because they're trying to kind of work with everybody, they're telling us that although these plans are for a house that is 3,400 square feet, in reality, their intention is to build a house that is under 3,000 square feet, so they will not have to go to the planning board. So that's just, in case anybody missed that. Yeah.
I think you,
Planning board already. And we already went to the planning board. and-
with the larger,
Right, and even they just told us we have to go to the zoning board first to determine if it's a buildable lot.
Okay, so they were
So
concerned
we're
about,
just- Yeah,
yeah.
we're just trying to see if the zoning board can grant it, and then we're more than happy to work with the size, or, you know.
okay, so you're really looking for a determination as to whether or not this is a buildable lot
that's exactly right.
versus
That's right.
actual
I mean, everything
approval of
else-
these plans or this
Everything else at
petition.
this point would be academic if the lot itself is not built.
Yeah. All right, what was my other?
So if it's not a buildable lot, then you're not gonna need a variance, obviously.
No, the variance authority you have would, by granting that, would allow this to be a buildable lot. And then, if it was a buildable lot, depending on what was built, and it's our expectation that it's going to be less than the 3,000 square feet, that's our intention.
But
It's going to be a one-family, pardon me, I'm
the
sorry.
criteria would still be the same for a variance, meaning you started off by talking about, you said you're not gonna focus on topography, you're not gonna focus on shape, so you
I'm focusing
focused
on
on soil.
Soil.
Did you provide any, is there any kind of report or geotech or anything that goes to the soil condition at that property, or is it just what you've presented?
Well, it's what is presented and what the neighbors, I'm sure, will, not only will it tell you, but from what I've read and what I've heard in my discussions with, not necessarily Council Demento, but Friend Demento, as he was referred to in the letter of opposition, was that the thrust of the neighborhood concern was the fact that this is an area that was prone to flooding. And because the soil was not absorbent, and because of its being in a flood zone. So, I mean, if in fact, that
guess so.
geotechnical information,
My question for you is, how is that soil problem causing the hardship, when the hardship is that the lot is, the lot is undersized?
No,
What's that?
Too small. No
Too small.
Not enough frontage and too small.
Yeah, whereas the soil isn't creating that condition.
in order for the board, if the board were to grant a variance, they could do that. If they granted a variance, they could grant a variance to make it a buildable lot. That you have the authority to do. In order for me to convince the board that you had that authority, I have to speak to the criteria that is defined within the bylaw regarding variances. And one of the criteria has to be shape, topography, or soil conditions.
I understand that, but I guess what I'm asking you to do is to explain to me how the soil conditions are causing the hardship.
Well, the soil conditions are not causing the hardship. The soil conditions are a criteria that has to be met in order for me to provide sufficient information for you to grant the variance. It's the whole concept of a variance isn't just hardship. It's a very convoluted concept of criteria, and that's why I went through. One of the criteria is the property itself, and then it goes on to talk about not generally affecting the zoning district. It then goes on to
But
talk
you're not
about.
looking for a variance with respect to the soil conditions.
No,
It has
no,
to-
I'm looking for a
Let me finish
Oh,
my
I'm sorry.
question.
Yeah, okay.
So, the variance, the only way that we could grant a variance would be to find that owing to circumstances related to the soil conditions. So what are the circumstances related to the soil conditions on which we would need to grant a variance here?
Well, the soil conditions, as I understand it, based upon hearing the video from November, because I can't tell you that I have any direct familiarity with that Zero Lodge, is that the lot itself in the area is prone to flooding because of the soil. The other factor is that there is an issue regarding this area. It's one of the reasons I suspect that it wasn't previously built on, and I can't imagine, but for the fact that it's got to this point where someone has found this earlier map, it probably would have been built on.
Let me
It
ask it
hadn't.
a different way. You're not saying that you would need a variance because of the soil
Oh,
conditions?
no, but in order for me to apply for the variance, I have to identify what about this lot, be it topography, or shape, or soil conditions, allows me to seek the requested relief.
But you understand what it says, owing to circumstances related to the soil conditions,
Right, right, and
So it's not just you come here and you say something about soil conditions, and that somehow allows us to go ahead and grant a variance. It has to,
completely
there has to be,
unrelated to
there has to be a
soil.
nexus
Yeah.
between the soil conditions and a reason why a variance would be warranted.
To clear him up, so if you said to me it's got an irregular shape, I mean, the fact that those sides are not parallel on both sides, that's irregular.
Okay.
Ipso facto, I'm short on my frontage, that's a more plausible hardship than the fact that because the soils are not good, I'm gonna make this lot with less frontage and not give you enough land to have a buildable lot. But isn't the overriding question here, you guys hit the jackpot that's not the jackpot, the opposite of the jackpot? You bought title insurance, so your lot was insured. Paul Lynch made a mistake. I mean, he has errors and omissions. Why isn't your title company just paying you and this thing just goes away and you get your money back? As opposed to you come here and you get your money and then you make money. When you shouldn't be making money, you're lucky enough to maybe get your money. Why aren't we just cashing the title insurance policy? And that's the end of
Because
it.
I suspect that, number one, they've engaged me not to.
But isn't that the real issue?
litigation
then?
attorney
Then
with regard to
you had a,
the
it
oversight.
was a mistake through no fault of its own, and it's confusing, et cetera.
I'm not disagreeing with you. If this was a strictly business decision, I want to see something built there because, like I said, I live in town, my kids go to school. It's an empty lot on that's a bigger lot than Lot A, and we need housing. Like, I really feel like this is a really good thing for the town. And it's not, yes, we can go that route, absolutely.
We can't and I'm not disagreeing with you, and I'm sure that you could come up with a plan where you make a house that the neighbors might like, and then instead of you guys making any money, they just let you come back even, and you put like a sump pump and drain the whole neighborhood. In other words, it's not a money-making thing, you just said that, it's just trying to get yourself whole and provide some housing, much-needed housing for the team. But that's not what we can't, that's like judge and jury, that's not our.
Well,
calling.
I thought, and I know I'm interrupting you, but I did think that the board had that authority. I thought if the board felt that there was a compelling argument to be made. There was, everything that was done could have been done, but that's not necessarily the criteria for variance. You brought up,
we say to the
you
next
brought up
guy?
an interesting issue with regard to the shape of the lot. I thought the soil conditions were probably
Kenny,
more.
what do you say to the next guy who
There-
comes in with the same thing?
Do you know something?
And you say, well, we can build another house here, and then we can build another house here. Yeah, I understand there's a housing shortage. Yeah, I understand that that's a good thing.
One 3,000 square foot house is not gonna help our house, I mean, if you were
No, but I
building
mean, it's
little,
just
you
like,
know, small
and where do
little
we,
units
then we
here or
turn the
something.
next guy down,
We tried
the next guy out.
Yeah,
And the
Well,
neighbors
those were
didn't want
25,
it.
those were quite large as well, but I guess my point is, this isn't, I understand that we have a housing crisis, but I don't, I mean, I'm not moved by that, in this scenario of a one house.
I mean, I think this house looks nice on, situated nicely. If there was no water problem whatsoever, it still doesn't change the fact that we're not on this board to make up our own rules to
Well,
facilitate.
I'm not sure you're making up your own rules. I think what I'm asking you to do, though.
I'm the
I think-
non-lawyer, those guys.
I think what I'm asking you to do, though, is favorably interpret with the authority that you have that's vested in your granting of a variance.
What do we
Now-
say to the next guy?
I think
Well,
that-
that's an interesting question. This was raised earlier, and I really would like to answer that. In all the years, and I've been doing this now for over 40 years, I've never run into this before. This is the very first time. There aren't a lot of orphan lots floating around like this one. This is unique. Now, it may not be unique in the sense that of the shape, of the topography, of the soil conditions in your estimation, but it's clearly a unique parcel, and you can grant that relief without affecting the zoning district.
But it can be, it's the concept. If we do it here, we do it for the next guy.
But there isn't I
No,
don't see
but,
there being the
no,
next guy.
not the next guy on a single-family house, lot, but the next guy who comes in for something different and says it's a two-family lot. We blew the lots, on the old golf course, behind the football fields. When we would have loved to give a variance and make it multiple lots, but we couldn't, and it was like, we just couldn't do it, even though that was 100% clearly the best plan, clearly the right thing to do from a, intellectual standpoint. And it's like, how do you say no? It doesn't have to be the same circumstances, but when you say no to the next guy who's got a variance question that's saying, yeah, but I'm providing housing for the town, I'm doing
Well,
a good deed.
I would not ask
That's
you to
the
make your
problem.
determination solely on that. I would ask you to look at this lot as unique. I would ask you to be able to look beyond the concern that you have, that if you were to grant this variance, that forevermore, you will be required to grant variances because of this. And I would tell you this is a different situation. This is one where in 1949, and this is so important, and the important part is I don't have an answer because the town hasn't afforded me the opportunity to explain it because the records are not here. Is that a criteria? Probably not. But that's the problem that we have, and that's why this lot is different. And maybe because of the fact that it is in fact narrower in the front and wider in the back, as you suggest, and maybe I wasn't clever enough to have seized on that, but that makes it different too. So.
Ken, it's not even close really to making a to
Are there any
satisfying
circumstances
the
yet?
criteria for a variance. It's not even close. It's not the shape, the hardship has to arise from that soil condition. But also, going on the hardship, it's a personal hardship. And that letter that Attorney Lynch received from Baldacci's letter, and Attorney Lynch is a smart lawyer, and Baldacci's letter was clearly based on assuming that everything it was clear that Rich Baldacci did not make an independent, he did not make an independent
I'm not throwing him under the bus.
determination.
I really mean.
And Paul Lynch saw that because he's a smart lawyer. Because in that letter from Baldacci, I'm in receipt of your title history, that's how he starts off, of the vacant lot. Based on your research, the lot has not been held in common ownership. It is my determination that having proved the status of the grandfather, he's clearly telling the lawyer that, I'm giving you the letter, but,
Based on the
I'm not
facts
doing
you
any
give me.
independent thing. I'm assuming that everything you say
It's right.
You say it's true, so, and Paul, let me just finish, take your time. Just settle down. And so Paul Lynch is a smart lawyer, and he knew that, and I don't know what the conversations he had with his clients, but Paul Lynch knew that, you know, that Rich Baldacci's not really giving me the, you know, an independent letter there, so we're at some risk here, and if we buy this property, you know, you're buying it at your peril. Okay, I think that's clear from reading Baldacci. That's all right. That's my take on Baldacci's letter. Okay.
You know something?
I mean, how much? You know, I wouldn't put out a lot of money based on that letter.
I agree with you.
Okay.
You want to know this? I agree
So
with
it's
you.
the hardship's personal, and it can't be, you know, under the criteria. So that's number one. The hardship's personal, and the hardship does not arise. Whatever hardship there is, does not arise from either soil or shape of the lot, which it must in order to. So we'd have to like so ignore the criteria of the, you know, to give you a variance. And I agree with you. The lot is unique, but it's not uniqueness. It's not the criteria.
Well, you know, I'll leave it at this. If the board were predisposed to want to take the sort of the global approach and say, you know, there's so little harm and so much gain that we are going to interpret it in a more liberal way than the board has up to this point reviewed these, they could do that. I mean, there are zoning boards of appeal all over the state. I don't appear in front of all of them, but I've appeared through many, that when they want to get there because they believe that that's the right way, and they think they are not traumatizing the concept of what these variances are, grant them. But I'm not telling you to do what others do. I'm telling you to do what you feel comfortable doing, what you feel right. And I thought that there was enough information that you could do that. I would not have wasted anybody's time in going through this process if I didn't think you had that innate authority. If you wish not to exercise it, that's the prerogative of the board. And every board has a different personality depending on its interpretation or strict interpretation. It's like the Constitution. You know, is this a living document? Do you read it for what it says and you can't read outside of those? That's your right, and I can't take it away from you, and I can't tell you what you can and cannot do. I'm asking. I'm asking because I thought in the long run there was enough information with regard to the history, the lot itself, what I thought the neighbors were looking for, and they can speak for themselves. They're all here. I'm sure they're not all here to support me, but I'm sure they're here because they have something worthy they think. And I also suspect, like everything else, you know, nobody wants anything else that's not currently there. And that's understood. But in a town that is screaming for and granting things like accessory dwellings, this is great. This would be another home that we could provide without asking, I believe, too much of your board. And that's why I'm here. I don't want to make a mockery of what you think is the variance criteria. I don't ask you to expand it if you don't feel comfortable doing that. I thought that there was enough history of what occurred, and the fact, and this is where I'm going to leave it, the fact that the town couldn't even help us to understand what was done in 1949 that created this mess, because they destroyed, or their records were destroyed, probably through no fault of their own. They just stored them in the, you know, the pumping station, which is where most of those records were destroyed, and are no longer capable of trying to explain. But the only thing that you have to understand is in 1949, when they did that, they must have been doing this with a principle that provided them the authority to do it, because otherwise what they've done is they destroyed two lots. They took one lot and they made two non-buildable lots out of that. There was an existing structure. But if one lot is not a buildable lot, then you couldn't do anything with the other lot because it has the same issues. You can't tear that house down, but if anyone, like the Grasses, want to come before this board for any relief.
They didn't destroy that lot with a house on it. That lot that had the house on it was going to be grandfathered forever. They knew that.
I'll take, you know why it's not?
They might have wanted that house on this lot, and we want this land over here to be vacant for whatever reason.
No, but
That could have been the reason. That could have been the missing decision that got lost in the flood. Could have been exactly what they did. That could have been, well, we want that lot to never be built on.
I'll tell you
Next to this lot with the house on it. That's why we're gonna do it.
Well,
Maybe that's what it is.
that lot had been sold. It's been, the consideration in the past was there. I can't imagine that it was sold in order to destroy
Connect
value.
the wall connected.
Can I say something? When you look at the MLS listing for this house, it very clearly says
On these
that it's
lots.
in a flood zone and it needs a variance. I mean, it says that in the
Well,
listing.
I wasn't their attorney, but
No, I'm just saying.
I trust.
It's in the
I trust-
listing, so you must have had some sort of idea.
That's why-
Well, that's why we hired a
Yeah,
zoning attorney.
yeah, and then you didn't
know,
get the
I'm
right
not a
information. I
zoning
get
attorney,
that,
and
but
I'm sure
like,
the agent is not a zoning attorney.
but
either.
also, like, the idea of a variance, and, you know, we don't often give, if at all. So,
I mean, I just-
knowing
The
that
The criteria for
information-
for a variance as opposed to a
feel-
special
I
permit
feel
is very.
like-
We've been through a lot of zoning
Yeah.
boards
Yeah.
before in Boston,
Yeah.
Everett, and, you know, obviously those boards are a little bit more lenient in variances
Yeah.
for other reasons, and I completely understand.
So that's what I was doing on my phone, because it's
Yeah, yeah,
very,
I completely, but
it's
I just,
there
you know,
in the
agents,
MLS
they're
listing.
not attorneys, and whoever the agent was, probably went to the building department and
And
said,
couldn't
is this a
find-
buildable lot?
and they were
probably
told
said,
they-
"You
No
need a
one knew,
variance."
yeah,
Nobody knew.
no one wanted to commit that it was.
Exactly.
So, so do you have anything more new to add? Because we have a lot of people here who might have some things that they want to say.
Well, I'm
or
not sure,
questions
based
that
on
they
what I've
have.
heard, that they need to say anything unless they're here in support.
But we've already heard a lot.
Yeah.
We heard at the last meeting, we don't want any repetition of what we heard already. We already heard from the other.
My
people.
question
Unless you
that's
want-
kind of for the lawyers on the board as well is, assuming we are not comfortable giving a variance, because these plans sort of are these plans aren't really relevant because they're, you know, 500 square feet larger than what I guess the question is, can we make a finding that's different from this petition?
The only thing in this petition that I'm going forward on was the request for the variance for a buildable lot. You can put into petition things that you don't, in other words, you can ask for everything, but the only thing that you're addressing, and the only thing I'm addressing with this board now, was whether is the lot buildable or not.
So it doesn't matter what the size of the structure is, it could be, 100 square foot, anything,
Yes.
it's buildable
Or
or
it's not buildable. I guess my question is, if your intention was to appeal, would it be appealing, this is just, you know, for my own education, really, the entire special permit here that is a 3,500 square foot house, or just the fact that is it buildable or not buildable?
Well, I guess to some degree, it's the result of whatever decision this board renders. That's the only thing I can appeal. So if the board's decision was predicated upon the fact that the board could not grant the relief to make it a buildable lot, any appeal would just be focused on that and that alone.
So, my view would be, this is a legal opinion, but is if we deny the petition based upon a finding that it's not a buildable lot, or that the petitioner has not convinced us that it's a buildable lot, then that would be the decision. They could appeal that decision, and if the land court, or, if you bring it to Superior Court, decides to remand it, saying, for some reason that exceeded our authority, then we would have to then determine, okay, it is a buildable lot, and then there would be the second question as to whether or not the structure that they have indicated they intend to build. In my opinion, we're locked into this petition because this is the petition that was noticed publicly. And I know that there's been some discussion, I think, about changing the size of the house.
That's correct.
But at least in my view, it's really a simple kind of a gating question as to whether or not it's a buildable lot.
Okay, so that it wouldn't
Yeah.
somehow override any sort of special permit requirement that would come later because it's an undersized lot and doesn't have enough frontage. It still would require a special permit to build on it if it was determined buildable by.
Put two buildings on one lot in the A4 district, is that what this is?
Yeah, it could be a two-family in that district.
But you can put two buildings on one lot.
No, you can put one building on the lot that's a two-family.
Okay, but you can't build two.
And we have enough lot size, it's just.
No, but you can't build two buildings.
No, you cannot have two principal residents. Well, I'm not sure now with the with this accessory dwelling unit concept of which you could turn your garage into an accessory dwelling.
No, I'm only asking,
attached if it's smaller.
I'm only asking in the theory that if you own the neighbor's house next door and merge the lot and then build a second single-family home, you had a two-family.
That you could do.
There.
Yep.
No, because one would have to,
No, I think what Andrew was saying,
Secondary
and I
structure
would
would
agree with
still
him, if we were to, this is so hypothetical.
Right,
but it's
acquire
interesting.
one of the
If we were to purchase a Grasso's home, and we then had this conforming lot once again, we could put
Second unit.
two-family there, because it's zoned in an A4 for two-family. I
Correct.
guess that's what you were saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And we only need like a little bit of frontage.
I know,
to
but
make
you
this-
don't
and
have
then
it
we
on
wouldn't
either
even
end.
be here.
Right.
So,
Well, you need lot
that's-
size, too.
Need lot size as well.
No, because I think we're, isn't it 6,000?
Well, it was 6,000 back in 1948.
Oh,
It's
sorry,
now
sorry.
10.
Because
So it's now
it's
10,000.
80 feet of frontage.
Mr. Demento pointed that out the last hearing.
So just, I
Right,
guess
it's
that's
10,
good, that
yeah.
clarifies for me. So our decision would be very deliberate, specific.
Right, and that's also the decision you're asking.
That's what you're after, as opposed to any of these, because we're basically not
Well, let me
looking at plans, we're not
I'm gonna make it
talking about this building, it's not even the building you want to build
I'm
anymore.
gonna make it easier for you. We will withdraw that portion of our request for because a special permit just doesn't even apply. It's not a dimensional special permit request. It's much more fundamental. It's a variance request. It's for a buildable lot.
Okay.
That's,
My boat, and I'll have a trailer.
you know, I guess if you were to have granted the variance, and then we were similarly asking for relief for some dimensional aspect, then all of it would come into play.
Right,
But now the fundamental question is the lot that was created in 1949 a buildable lot? And,
Right.
and at this point, the building inspector is not providing us with a building permit, and therefore we're
Ken,
coming before the
I have a question.
Yes,
So, for better or for worse, you're denied here. What can your clients do with this lot? Can they make it boat storage? Can they drop a boat in a crib and maybe leave a dump truck on the site? I mean, what?
I think, you know,
Can they
it's
build-
not
can
a
they build
structure.
anything?
It's
I
not
don't
a
think
structure,
they
so I
would-
guess,
they have intention.
I guess what you're saying is, and you're right,
I mean, what can you do?
they can
with
do
the land
anything that's
other
not a
than-
structure, because they own the lot. They could park some cars there. They could, whatever doesn't require a building permit.
rules about parking unregistered cars, I mean, there's lots
Well,
of
no, right, you can
different
park registered
things.
cars, all registered.
You know, and there's lots of things in the
There's a lot of
bylaw.
things you could do
And I don't
with
think
it.
they have any
But I don't
intention
think
to
they
be
have any
bad
intent-
neighbors and to
No,
junk up
and
the
we
lot,
don't,
like,
we don't want to do anything, you know,
but look, I mean, they said that that's not their intention.
no, obviously, we're not trying to incite any kind of ill will. But you're right, you have this piece of property that they purchased in good faith, based upon the opinions that were given, based upon the information that was available, and they find themselves in this pickle.
Because you can't even donate it because it's not a buildable lot to be able to, recover through a tax loss.
Well, I'm sure you could donate to the town, they could put something there, but, they're not in a position, these are young men with kids that aren't just donating $500,000 because of an error. And just getting back to the point that was raised earlier, their purpose in being here isn't to get even, in the sense that they were retrieving the money. Sure, they can file a claim under their policy. They could bring an errors and omissions claim against the title council. They could do anything they want. That's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to build a house. And they thought that here was a lot that was vacant for 75 years, that they could do in such a way that would not antagonize a neighbor, would to some degree mitigate the water issue because of putting either some underground vault in to help distribute the water, not put a basement in, which would displace water, and we would be everybody would benefit from it. But I can't get there unless this board was willing to grant the relief that we're seeking.
And I understand it. It's like, and even if you got there, I'm curious if the,
Yeah, I think we are. I think we are into,
What?
what?
We moved into beating a dead horse
Okay,
territory.
yeah, I mean,
I think
just
I
don't-
think you
everything
understand what the
that's been
feeling
said
of the
has been
board,
said.
of the board is, and so your intention is to withdraw the request for special permit,
Well,
but
let
you
me,
would,
let me say this, we may, and I've got to speak to my client, we may withdraw the application in its entirety and not go through any determination from this board which would impact the future viability of that lot.
That's-
So that may be what we're going to ask the board to do.
Okay.
And if the board would could do one of two ways, we could continue this and give me some time, or if you want to give me a few minutes, I'll speak to my clients, and then I can maybe respond, I don't know, but.
Can you not enlist town council and, and perfect 1948 and 1949 in some way that works for you? I mean, in other words, now you got a problem, can you, go about it that way to try and,
We've honestly exhausted everything. We're like stuck.
Yeah,
And like,
yeah.
I don't wanna, I've never sued anyone in my life, I don't wanna go that route. But
Yeah,
it's-
yeah.
you
Is
know,
there
it's-
enough frontage from the the abutting parcels that, there isn't that you could?
no, this
you could-
guy's 50,
No.
it's 80.
Oh, they would
Talking
become
about that
non-conforming.
before, right? You were borrowing.
They need more than just frontage
But they
though, because
need more than that.
they
No, I know.
need 3,000 square feet
Right,
too.
but they could, if
3,500 square feet.
again, I don't know the size of the abutting lots, but if there was an agreement to purchase just a certain part of, 10 feet on both sides or whatever, and then enter into an agreement with the neighbors that they won't build on that property.
Brad, you can't do that only
Hold on one
because you
second.
can't make a non-conforming lot more
You could
non-conforming.
turn
These are all
around
non-conforming.
and say, look, this is an irregular shaped lot. It's not a perfect rectangle, it's a regular shaped lot. And so therefore, you could see your way to the frontage thing, or maybe you could, so that you could get a frontage variance, but I don't know how you say it's less than the required frontage. And I don't know
You
what,
could get I'll tell you how you do the frontage. You could do a radius. I've done this on other properties. You take this line, and by making it a curved line, you can create a larger frontage. But, it's, I wouldn't,
matter.
I wouldn't go
That's
through
not a
that,
problem.
that unless the board was saying that that was something that would,
Okay, so do you want to take 5 and discuss, or do you want to postpone?
No,
I mean,
I'm gonna take, if you'll give me
Continue.
5?
yeah.
Thank you. Did you want to hear from,
I think we'll see what you decide, and then see if they have any questions based on what you
his
decide.
frontage, he needs 80, he's got 51. So theoretically, you could go like this,
But the problem with that is it would cut into
then he'd be
front
short.
yard.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, you'd have to change the house a little bit, he's got some room, you'd have to make the house smaller, but that's not the issue, this is the issue. He needs 10,000 feet, he'd be giving up frontage to create a street, and then he'd be even more underwater on that. He's got 2
I just didn't.
hammers.
Does this differ from the other one? Didn't the other one ask for the same relief? I thought it did.
I know, but it's a totally.
Would
new
anybody-
position, new number and new
Yeah.
everything.
Heather,
Yeah.
if all the neighbors said, look, let the guy build a single-family home and spend donate $50,000 to correct our water problems, would you let him do it? Or my problem is that, how do you say,
They're not, all this stuff, they don't want.
period.
We can't get it.
There was no shift.
What's that?
Still on?
Yeah. No, I'm just asking.
No, honestly, there was no
If
shift.
someone,
Are
if
we
they're gonna
being
build as much
recorded?
time.
Are we being recorded?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're being
Okay.
recorded.
But I'm not, am I asking something that you can't do? I just don't
That's the
don't
question.
understand. And
I
I'm
don't-
not
I don't
saying
think
it's
we
like,
get there with
when
this.
when we grant this variance, it's not the same idea. It's the next guy who comes up with a variance, it's got the same sob story, different circumstances.
Right, right.
And how do we say no to him but yes to them?
The variance is.
There are some boards.
Do you have a
that
question?
Variance criteria.
Sorry, we're still in the middle.
Oh, I asked her if she had, I thought she might have had a procedural
Oh,
question.
no, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're still in the middle, we gotta.
Yeah.
No, you're okay. We
No,
just have
yeah.
to wait. It's just like this.
Yeah, if you have like a procedural question about what's happening, and then afterwards, we're gonna have him say what he plans to do, and then if you have any questions about that, you can
No,
ask.
it's okay. It just has to be.
Yeah. That's all right, sorry.
I feel bad for the guys.
They got the rector.
What's that?
That's a good project.
But you're 100% right, and Baldacci said, yeah, if all the facts you tell me are right.
Yeah, then.
Yeah. It's like George Santos.
I know.
If he really went to college and he really was the basketball player and he really did this and he really did that, yeah, that's the guy we're voting for. But that's not the guy we voted for. Isn't it the same thing as George Santos? If everything you said is who you are and it's true, then yeah, that's the guy we elected. But we didn't elect you.
We didn't like this person.
Yeah.
My concern was that if we denied this and they won on appeal, that it would be this 3,500 square foot house that they would be able to build. Do you know what I mean? Like that it would have, the appeal so that's where I don't, because I don't know, don't
Well,
have
they could-
experience with land court and what happens on an
Well,
appeal.
they could put it, if it was buildable, they could put that two-family in there.
Well, if it's buildable, they'd have to go to build, and that was close to 4,000, that was over 4,000 square feet, they need to go to planning, and that would.
I don't think the 400 square feet,
Barely over 2,000 square feet.
Heather, I don't think the 400 square feet is the thing that's an issue. You know, that house, 3,400.
No,
We're
no,
only
but-
going to 29,999 just
To
to
avoid,
avoid going.
to avoid planning, I realize that, but they still would they still would need a special permit, even if it's determined, yes, this is a buildable lot, they still need a
Still
special
need a
permit to
special
actually
permit if
build
he
on
wants
it.
to build, if he
And
wants to build.
I just wanted to make sure that was the
3,400,
process, yeah.
Over 3,000.
But they can appeal out
Yeah, they can appeal,
Mansfield or whatever that place is.
He's not gonna do that because he can't win an appeal, he doesn't have a hardship.
if we deny it, they can appeal, if they withdraw it, then they can't, then it's done.
That's throwing good money after bad. That's
The appeal?
Yeah, you don't have the grounds for a variance. So, and if you're not sympathetic at the old days, the board would say, yeah, look, everybody likes the project, we'll give it to you. If nobody appeals, great. If they appeal, there's nothing I can do. What did Mark Kornitsky do, the liberal lawyer?
Yeah, yes, I'm over at Planet Fitness.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, yeah. Took some adjustment, but
What, Gold's?
adjusting to it now.
Were you at Gold's?
At, the old Golds.
Yeah.
Salem Fitness?
Yeah.
We were there like 25 years. Yeah, a lot of people
Did
were.
anybody time?
No.
Yeah, I missed that gym, that was unique.
Should have. Oh, but I can tell
There's
you,
no
I
gym like that anymore, they were all based on, all the gyms now are that kind of
Accessory.
Planet Fitness model.
Yeah.
That was old school, big, muscle heads and, total opposite idea of Planet Fitness. And I love that, that's what I like that.
Yeah.
Guys dropping,
807,
making a lot of noise. But,
Yeah, I
you
saw it.
know, with the gallon of water,
What's going
Yeah,
on?
but-
Are they doing anything with that space?
No, not that I've heard. Everybody's hoping that somebody else will come in and do another gym. It's really big.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kept on expanding. I remember the guy who did it.
I don't know. Because I know so many people, so many relationships with people over the years. It's like a social thing.
Totally. I know
And
that.
everybody went different ways, so yeah, that was the toughest part.
Was it just suddenly one day?
No, it was, the guy who owned it, just didn't put any money into it at all. Never fixed it. And something broke, it was broken. And that was going on for years.
But that was its charm.
He came in right before the pandemic. He had good intentions,
Yeah.
and,
Andy, how does it work if they sell the
downhill.
title insurance? Who owns the building out? Who owns the land after?
The title insurance company.
They just
Can't he
own
just, I mean, isn't that what it's really about? I bought title
Yeah.
insurance and you guys made a mistake and go sue Paul Lynch and that's
It's
it.
not about title, it's about
course it is.
usability.
right,
No, but if I get a zoning opinion, if I get my title insurance, I get a survey. No
Yeah.
survey exception, so they surveyed it, I got the land, no title, no, liens on it or
Yeah.
some estate or whatever problem, that's clean. And I get a zoning endorsement, which is, yeah, you can build a single-family home, yeah, you can build a shopping center, yeah,
But that's not what
and that's what they insure it, you pay for that.
They did get it,
But you insure it.
yeah.
And so, okay, the zoning opinion's wrong. His opinion was wrong. He said that, the building inspector couched his opinions, the circumstances were wrong. So you can't, in the old days, I used to not talk to the building inspector and skulk around. Then I come right out and say, look, this is what I want to do, can I do it or not do it? But now I've learned, you can't trust, it doesn't make any difference what he says. It only makes a difference what your attorney says after he does gets that plan and looks at this thing. So Paul Lynch should have pulled every one of those documents and reviewed every one of those documents to make sure the chronology was right, that this was right, the maps
I mean, it
were
does
right.
you can see where the error happened with that map that was edited after the fact, where you can see how the error
Right.
could happen, but that's why.
Yeah, I'm sure it's an
Paul Lynch has errors and omissions insurance, right?
Exactly. That's the answer.
Now the will.
I think he told his clients, you buy it, you buy it, you pay it on. I'm sure he did. He's a smart guy. They didn't go in there, oh, wow, really? Like, I don't know if anybody was shocked. I really don't.
Very clearly says it in the listing.
that it's not. It says it in the listing.
Oh, yeah, that it's buildable?
No,
Oh.
it's not, it's very much not. Or that it's, would require a variance.
Well, that's, I have no sympathy with that. If that's the case,
What?
that's a whole different story.
What's this, an MLS?
Yeah, that's
It's-
the listing for this.
It
Rare opportunity.
reminds me of Charlie Patsios when he built on Humphrey Street.
Seller makes
And he
absolutely
wanted
no.
to- He wanted, right, he
No
wanted to make,
representation
he wanted to put
for
3
warranties.
buildings where he put the 2 buildings.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him,
Guys,
and I'm
do your own
thinking,
due diligence.
seriously? So you're gonna just walk in here,
that's pretty
we're gonna
crazy.
say, okay, you need 100 feet of frontage, but we'll give you a variance and give you 350.
Yeah.
And then you walk out with $1 million and like, nobody else thought of that. That you're just gonna waltz in here and say, okay, give me a variance for my frontage, and now I'll build 3 buildings on Humphrey Street, and I'll make $1 million with just pushing some paper around, you know? Doesn't work that way, you know, you gotta do a little bit of work.
All right, should we call it
Yeah.
back in?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go get it.
Which way do we go?
Now. I mean, you can always continue and continue. You
No,
can
he-
continue this and continue that conversation and then make next month withdraw.
I'm not gonna vote in favor of a continuance on this one.
He's gotta withdraw it,
He's got to withdraw it.
Yeah.
and then he can just,
He's asking for 2 more minutes, okay. All right, I'll give him 2 more minutes.
Long 5 minutes.
Yeah.
She sent you. She just sent you.
Should have taken that gavel with you.
Taking,
we have another petition.
no, this is it.
Okay, so let's call the meeting over and let's just leave out this door. When he comes back in, everybody will be gone. You know, talk too long, Ken. Yeah, so do I.
I mean, I feel bad.
But if they said, you know, if they were like telling you, look, you can't be building here, you know, you need something, and then you still went ahead and did it, you know, fool me once. What's that?
It says it in the,
Yeah.
no, the thing is that then after that, they did what they thought was their due diligence.
Right.
And
I know.
it happens, I mean,
That's just the
mistakes
wrong
get made.
Exactly.
It wasn't a big loss when you think of what a buildable lot in Swampscott costs.
What did they pay?
250.
Oh, yeah, so that's why you paid $250.
Exactly.
I want to thank the board for the indulgence of giving us the opportunity to speak to our clients. I'm going to ask for another month, right? You know, maybe there's something about the soil conditions that we can find, I don't know. But I don't want to not explore every possible issue that might be presented or presentable. And if there isn't any, we'll just be coming back and either asking for a decision or asking to withdraw without prejudice. It's going to be up to their counsel to make that decision, and I can't make it for them. So if you will provide us with an additional month, we would ask for that relief. Thank you.
So what they're asking for is to continue to next month.
That's right.
And at that point, they will either withdraw the petition or ask for a decision, but we won't be,
Well, if-
unless there's new information
Right,
to
right,
present,
right.
we won't be hearing new
Well,
information.
you know, one of the
Unless they realize something different. I just wanted to see if anybody has questions specifically like procedural about what's going on. We have written statements, so we understand the neighbors' concerns, and we heard them at the last, for the last petition. But if you have any kind of procedural questions about what's happening, feel free to raise your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, my concern is the water table, the water.
Yeah, if you could say,
He's concerned about the water
oh,
table.
the water table. Okay, so we're not addressing it, or addressing anything with the water table. But if you have any kind of procedural questions as to the process.
Well,
Anybody?
how about the concerns of the people?
So we have a written statement from everyone, and then we also had public comment at the last meeting, so I think we have a lot. If there's something that wasn't said at the last meeting or isn't part of the written statement, something new that's happened recently that is a concern, But I think we have heard a lot of the neighbors' concerns,
Okay.
just in the,
Anyone online?
so,
That goes for anyone online too. If anyone online has a question specifically related to procedure, about anything else,
or
or
something
has a
that
new
hasn't
concern to
been-
address, correct, but
All right, are we seeing none?
Would you like me to sign a continuance form while I'm here?
So, first so we would need to make a motion to continue until our July meeting.
Do we have a date for that?
Do we have a date?
18th.
July 18th. So I'm going to make a motion to continue to our July 18th meeting. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so you have your continuance, and we can sign that with Marissa. All right, so
Then
the,
I'll email that to you, the continuance form.
If I do receive anything in addition, which I plan on submitting, I will get that into the board well before the July 18th. If there's any kind of geotechnical information that makes this soil specifically unique,
so just so you don't waste time and money, I think we've kind of come to the conclusion that what you need to do is not convince us that the soil is unique, but convince us that the soil uniqueness is causing the hardship. That's where
Right.
that's where the
no,
disconnect is.
I hear what you're
So
saying.
I mean, you don't want to spend a lot of time on that.
And I would also ask if you don't have that information, and, you know, you alert us as well, so whether you have it or you don't, you inform the board before the hearing, preferably, so that if you're gonna withdraw the petition at that point and you don't wanna go forward with the formal vote, that we can avoid, you know, having another hearing on this one.
Well, if there is another hearing, it's going to be more perfunctory than anything else. So without any additional information, and if I don't have it, I'm not going to be burdening this board with any further comments.
You never do that.
Well, there's always a first time, Mr. Doherty.
What's the date of the next hearing?
It's July 18th.
18th.
Maybe I need to find the card.
All right, so I'm going to move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Thanks, everyone.